that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Okay, this is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. I'm George Harvey. Here's Tom Finnell. And here's Mark Crowther, who is our guest. He's going to be talking about aquaponics. And in case you wonder, yes, there is a connection between energy and aquaponics. And it's an important one, I think. Every day I get up. This morning I actually got up about 3:15, but usually by 4 o'clock. And I spend a couple of hours looking at the news, working on my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, and I write for Green Energy Times, but I find a lot of material which I put online on that blog, synopsis to articles that I found in the day's news with a link to each article. And what I'm doing here is I'm just reading through the week's news, the 20 or so articles that I thought were the most interesting of the week, and that's why it's called Energy Week. So we'll start in on the 25th, on the 23rd of May. We got these reports. Renew Economy has had an article saying EDP, a major European utility with equal exposure to fossil fuels, wind and hydro, says that onshore wind is the cheapest of any utility scale technology. The levelized cost of electricity of onshore wind in Europe is 20% cheaper than gas and 30% cheaper than coal. The same day, Huffington Post reported that the UK's Prime Minister, an avid supporter of fracking or shale gas, is set to boost extra compensation offered to communities affected by controversial fracking to an average of £800,000 in a bid to bypass opposition in the Tory heartlands. And I can just imagine going to the people of Guildford and saying, we'll give you $1.2 million if you'll let us frack. It ain't gonna work, I don't think.
I think you'll get to it later, but apparently this fracking is turning out to be a huge bubble.
Boy, is it ever. Oh, man. Here we go. That from Huffington Post. From CNN, same day. An environmental advocacy group backed by the hedge fund tycoon Tom Steyer, I gave that a German pronunciation. It's a German name, I think, is set to unleash a 7-state $100 million offensive against Republican, quote, science deniers, end quote, this year that could help decide which party controls the Senate and key state houses come November. I've been wondering.
I missed the first word. Is this North Carolina?
No, this is the whole country.
Okay, because I got something about, oh, here it is. It's the next one down.
Next
Green
one down?
billionaire prepares to attack anti-science Republicans.
Yes,
Yeah,
well,
that's the one.
I've been wondering which billionaire and when this is going to come about. But I just saw it coming because Koch Industries is just, okay, let's, put our heads in the clouds.
Yeah, Tom Steyer, huh? That's the same guy.
Yeah. That was from CNN. The same day, National Journal supplied us with this little bit. Wind is going head-to-head with natural gas in the heart of the fracking boom. And wind is winning. What do you think about that? In 2003, wind made up less than 1% of the national power supply. By 2013, it was roughly 10%. Now, I've got one minor problem here, and that is I put that in my blog, and I didn't note which country it was in. So, I'm not. Uh-oh. Shame on me. Okay, going on to the 24th. The U.S. energy world was rocked by a new Energy Information Agency report that significantly cut the projection of recoverable oil from the massive Monterey Shale formation in California. The cut was 96%.
That's
significant.
I'll pull that up here. That was definitely what I was referring to now.
Well, there's a lot about fracking this week.
Let me get
Just
this.
a lot about fracking, and it's all bad.
Yeah, let me pull this guy up, because this is what you're just talking about.
Is that the Monterey Shale? Oh, it looks like it, doesn't it?
Well, this is in the U.S. This particular picture is in England, or
Oh.
articles about England. Let me see if I
The
know I
picture
got.
is in the U.S. though. That's not.
Yeah, I
England.
know
That looks like California.
Yeah, I'll let you talk for a little while I find it.
You don't have to find it, Tom. We don't have to know where these things come from. All we need to know is what they mean. Okay,
Well, what
No,
was
here's
interesting-
the article. Here's the article.
there you go. What?
I was just, interested in that quote that was highlighted, just saying, that it's good for their country, and everything points otherwise, of course.
Well, there's a lot of there are many sides to these issues, and people invent their own sometimes.
Well, here's a picture of Southern California up there on the screen, and it turns out from their estimates, compared to what they're actually getting out, they were off by 96%. They're only getting 4% of the original estimate. And it's now thought that only 4% of the original estimate is now thought to be technically recoverable at today's prices.
Well, at today's prices is an important issue here.
Oh yeah, if the
Well,
price
it-
goes up, this is all going to change.
It's going to change, but then on the other hand, well,
But it can't go up too much, because then it moves coal, it moves oil.
that's right. But there is a if you look at the death spiral thing, you get into a situation where you realize the price could go up because the companies are going broke, and it's the only way that they can keep themselves open. And they could go up even though they have reserves elsewhere that are easier to get to than these things.
Well, if you'll see that picture, the items outlined in orange are all owned or controlled by Occidental Petroleum.
Oh my gosh.
So if you have any Occidental Petroleum stock, now's the time to sell it.
Yeah. Well, what can you say? I haven't got any Occidental Petroleum stock.
I sold mine yesterday.
Did
Yeah.
you really?
Oh, yeah.
On my advice. Wow. I hope I was right. Okay, same day. That, by the way, came from Clean Technica. And this also came from Clean Technica. Writing on the NPD Solar Buzz blog, which despite its name has actually got some respect. Senior analyst Michael Barker has predicted that the United States PV market is set to reach a cumulative goal of 20 gigawatts by the end of 2014, which, in case anybody wants to know, is this year. Doubling capacity from 2013, although not at the end of 2013, thanks primarily to continuing declines in cost. And that is, it's the amount of PV has been going up at just an astonishing clip for year after year.
And it's going to go up probably at an increasing clip for the foreseeable
I think
future.
that's probably what's going to happen. The one thing that I would warn people about is, you've got the tulipomania, where somebody suddenly realized one day in Holland that the price of tulips had only gone up ever. It had never gone down. And so they started having tulip markets and things like that. And by the time they were done, they had tulips that were pretty expensive. One tulip bulb on one occasion was traded for something like 10 acres of prime building ground in the Dutch city of Haarlem. And you wonder how far you can go with things like that. Well, it didn't last.
Well, yeah, that tulip bulb, or tulip balloon is,
Tulipomania.
yeah, that's famous.
Well, actually, we'll get back to that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
My father, when I was a kid, gave me a book, and it was he said, read this book, it's a great book. And it had an introduction by Bernard Baruch, who said that it had saved him millions of dollars. And the name of the book was Memoirs of Great Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. and the book was published in like 1847. And it's been in print ever since. You can still get it. And I think there's probably 3 different publishing houses that are publishing that book. And the tulipomania is documented in the South Seas bubble, and maybe we'll see an addendum to it from modern times, and it'll include the shale oil bubble.
Well, if you look out there now, there's probably about 4 or 5 bubbles, economic bubbles worldwide that are ready to pop.
I
so.
think that may be the case. Yeah. So on the 25th of May, replacing fossil fuels with renewables as the world's primary source of energy will not only save the planet from dangerous levels of warming, it will also save the global economy $71 trillion by 2050.
Wow.
Don't you
Say that
love
number
this?
again.
That's a lot of zeros.
$71 trillion. Anybody want to pay the national debt off? According to a report released by the International Energy Agency.
I've heard of them.
Don't you love this? That was from countercurrents.org. And you know with the name countercurrents.org, they undoubtedly know what they're talking about. The next item from Clean Technica, because the current automotive industry is likely to be unsustainable, General Motors recently announced it is aiming to overhaul many of its operations. Now GM is more or less on track to achieve a goal of 500,000 electrified vehicles on the roads by 2017. I think it's remarkable that General Motors would say, by the way, gang, the automotive industry is unsustainable.
Well, as we know it, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only a matter of the infrastructure developing and the batteries getting a little bit better before it takes over
Well,
completely.
you know, one of the things that I've read a lot about EVs because of the stuff I've been doing. And I can't report this every time I can't put an item up every time I see it because it comes up every other day. But people are saying, I bought an EV. And I had to buy another because my wife wouldn't let me drive the one I bought because she wants it for herself.
Yeah.
And
Well, we've talked about exactly that. It's more fun to drive.
Yeah. I took a ride in Jason's Tesla, and I have to say that's an impressive vehicle, but there are certain things about it that are just going to be there for any kind of electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. And one of them is that it's quiet. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, one of the cars that I drove at one time was called a Zebra, spelled with an X, and that was a Chinese 3-wheeled vehicle, which it felt very cheap. It was very cheap, and but at the same time, it was fun to drive. Huh. It was really fun, and a lot of it is the experience of driving something that is utterly soundless.
So that's 2 wheels in the front, 1 in the back?
No, it's 1 in the front, 2 in the back. And in Vermont, a vehicle with that configuration in a lot of states is considered to be a motorcycle.
A motorcycle,
Yeah.
But,
Right.
but unlike most motorcycles, you don't need a motorcycle license to drive one of these things. And the distinction is anything that has an enclosed cab.
Right.
Can be even if it's a motorcycle, can be driven with a car license, and you don't need to have the motorcycle safety things like the helmet and such what. And in fact, you don't need the car safety things either. So you're authorized to go out and get yourself in a lot of trouble.
You're ready to move to New Hampshire.
No, the one thing that I hate about Vermont drivers,
Yeah.
they have this myth that if you have 2 painted lines in the middle of the road, you're still allowed to pass. And I asked a cop about that, and he said, well, technically, that's correct.
Okay, technically it is.
Technically, that does not say, you can't give a person a ticket for passing on a double line.
Right.
Okay.
Because the double line could theoretically be painted in the wrong place. But where the double lines are painted, those are places where you can't see far enough to pass. Mm-hmm. And so, if you try passing in one of those places, you can get a ticket because the line is
Get a
probably
ticket for unsafe passing or
unsafe
something.
passing,
Yeah.
and because the line is probably in the right place. So you're getting a ticket for passing in a no passing zone, not for crossing the double line. But people do cross those double lines in Vermont, I think because of that myth.
Well, in Vermont, if they put up a sign that says "Do not pass," that rules.
Oh, yes. And of course,
And in New Hampshire, Massachusetts
yeah,
as well.
I mind that a lot less than I do what they do down in Boston, which is pass you on the shoulder on a superhighway right before the exit that you're about to take. Anyway, we should be talking about energy.
Or on the sidewalk, right? If we're talking about Boston.
Absolutely. You know, the Massachusetts drivers are almost as bad as New Jersey drivers. The difference is that the Massachusetts drivers are a little bit more predictable. Okay.
More finger, less horn.
I guess, I don't know. Okay. That was, let's see, from Clean Technica. This is also from Clean Technica. Construction of the world's largest single-axis tracking solar PV plants, the 206 megawatt Mount Signal solar farm in southeast California, has been completed and is ready to generate enough electricity to power 72,000 households in the San Diego area. Is
That
a
one I
picture
got.
of it?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
isn't
one I
cool?
got. Let's pull that one up.
This is a,
This is a very large plant.
wow. I wonder what it would be like if they had that. You know what they could do, Mark? They
Okay.
could grow fish under those things.
They
We'll
could.
get to that. Okay.
Yeah,
Really?
Let's explore that.
Look at that picture carefully.
It
That's,
looks-
that's 2,000 acres,
Yeah.
3 square miles.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, you could have 3 square miles of fish under it.
Yeah, you could.
So 3 square miles for how many people?
72,000
72,000
households.
households. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. You get a lot of power out of these things. And that, let's see, was on the 25th. On the 26th of May, we got this from a site called Israel 21C. Close to half of the food in the world produces goes to waste. Whether it is on the farm, at the production or packing plant, or from the dinner plate. A company in Israel has stepped up to the plate in America, aiming to transform food waste to biofuel. This is part of a trend that we've talked about before. The one that I keep going back to is that processing plant that's going up in London that is costing $270 million.
You mean the one with coffee?
Well, it's
Coffee grounds.
They're putting $270 million into a plant that specializes in transforming the waste from hotel
restaurants.
Restaurants.
Okay.
From restaurants, and that sounds a little weird until you realize everything in the restaurant has got to be food grade.
Yeah, edible.
Edible, but you know, if you're taking household waste, people could be throwing stuff in there willy-nilly that you don't want being processed into something that goes into a farmer's field.
That's true.
So the compost that they generate, which is, I mean, a typical food waste plant is going to produce compost and something, and the something is very often methane, which is burned as natural gas or something like that. The compost portion of that is something that you could just take straight off to a field and grow carrots in it. And you know, that would be a safe thing to do, where you couldn't do that if it came from the household
waste. Yeah.
So that is anyway. The next one, International Business Times AU, says a Bloomberg report warns it would cost Australia billions of dollars and thousands of jobs if the Abbott government chooses to scrap the country's renewable energy target. An expert panel is currently reviewing Australia's goal of 20% renewable power by 2020. And
There's some strong stuff going on in Australia.
I don't, well, I think I do understand actually, and it's very depressing, but the Abbott government is just embracing coal.
Yeah.
And really, very clearly, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're not denying it.
Well, the coal lobby in Australia is very
powerful.
very powerful.
And I go back to Ian Dunlop, who used to be the president of the Australian Coal Association, which was, you know, the coal industry group, who has jumped ship and become an environmentalist, lobbying to get that whole thing under control. But you know, it's I think they're, you know what I think is going to change the Australians? on this in this regard, and it'll probably change other people as well, is the fact that the Chinese are not going to be buying more coal. And
That's a fact,
you
yep.
know,
Yep, and they're not going to know what to do with it.
I think that's
They
correct.
don't have enough capacity themselves to use it all up.
Absolutely, and we actually have another report that came out, I think, today that we will be getting to. Now, this next one is kind of exciting. This comes from the Energy Collective. Lawsuits filed in Illinois. And I never really got exactly how many of these lawsuits there are. I think there's 7 or 8 or 9 of them. But they're class action suits against something like 133 or whatever municipal agencies.
I got something on that up on the screen.
Do you? Okay.
A lawsuit filed in Illinois by Farmers Insurance.
Yeah. Farmers Insurance claimed the City of Chicago, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and other municipalities knew their stormwater infrastructure was insufficient to deal with extreme precipitation brought on in part by climate change. And what happened was last April they had floods, and Farmers Insurance got hit with claims, and they're saying these aren't justifiably ours. They're justifiably the City of Chicago and so forth, because they weren't taking care of business.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think this is going to be followed by more of the same.
I'll read the last paragraph because
Good.
it sums it all up.
Yeah.
For the insurance industry, it's time to get cracking. Beyond trying to find others to pay the price for inaction, they should be more engaged in the solutions discussion. That means looking at the properties they insure, the investments they make to hedge against losses, and even their active support for actions to on preparing for climate impacts and to slow climate change, such as the Obama's administration upcoming carbon pollution standards for power plants. And they sum it up here, it's not just the right thing to do for their bottom line, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, the insurance companies are behind that. The banking industry is behind it. The financial industries are behind it. The only people who are not behind it really are the fossil fuel.
The fossil fuel people.
And I think they're getting themselves alienated from more and more of their customers and so forth.
It's more intense in Australia than it is here at this point in time.
Yes.
Because other manufacturing organizations are fighting the coal lobby.
Yes.
That hasn't really happened here yet.
Yes.
But it will.
It will. Well,
And it's interesting about, the idea of the insurance company being more engaged with the solutions talk, because I think maybe the average American wouldn't even expect that to happen here.
yeah, but if you look at the numbers, it makes sense because the insurance companies have to charge rates based on empirical data. And the empirical data is in the past, and in a changing environment where things are getting worse, they have to be able to project that speed of things getting worse in order to be able to fix rates.
This is their real world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're in a tough spot. And again, I keep thinking about the properties that are on the beaches and the properties that are in the 500-year flood zones and stuff like that.
Big fight going on right now.
Yeah.
The wealthy are getting kind of
very
the short
expensive.
end of the stick,
Yeah,
and they're not happy about it.
That's right.
Hey, guy, you built your home on the beach, and you want us to take care of it?
You knew that there were going to be hurricanes, but the hurricanes are getting worse. Okay, now from Clean Technica again. Just 2 weeks after the U.S. Navy announced a major research partnership to ramp up its solar power and other clean energy programs, Barclays has warned that the solar market is likely to, quote, disrupt the status quo, end quote, for the electric utility industry sooner rather than later. And seeing the numbers that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, I find that very easy to believe. That thing about the guy that we talked about last week and the week before, what is his name? The fellow who wrote that article.
Jeremy Pritkin. Is that right?
Rifkin.
Jeremy Rifkin.
Rifkin.
Yep.
And he was saying, you got to be ready for capitalism as we know it to change, because, and the example is, now we've seen the prices of computer memory go almost to zero. And so people are giving away computer memory. If you go to WordPress, you can get a WordPress blog for free, and the blog comes with 3 gigabytes of memory. And they will say you can open as many as you want. And so they're basically giving away use of memory for free. And what he's saying
Which
is,
they're not getting for free.
no, they're not getting
They're
it for
paying
free.
big
but
bucks. They're paying
this
big
is
bucks
just
for
part
the-
of their
for the
marketing.
power.
Yeah, just part of the marketing that they're doing. We are going to be seeing in the not very distant future electricity being given away for free because because the price of it will be going almost to zero. This won't happen tomorrow, but it'll happen soon because when those solar arrays are paid down, the power that they produce is almost free compared to. I mean, the maintenance is extremely low. Every 15 years, you replace your inverter and you sweep the panels off when they get covered with snow, unless you're feeling lazy.
And they'll take care of that one pretty soon. Those panels will be
absolutely. Well,
self-cleaning,
those
you know.
ones that we've talked about that were
For the roads.
For the roads,
Yeah.
they clean themselves.
They clean themselves already.
Those are brilliant.
And they said that if you covered every road in the United States with those things, you'd have 3 times as much power as we need. It's just like,
Good problems to have, man.
what is this world coming to? Okay, now from Bellona, which by the way is a nonprofit based in Norway that is interested in renewable power. I get information about what's going on in Russia from them every once in a while. Russian authorities will continue to rely on nuclear power and drilling the Arctic shelf for the bright future.
Yeah, I read that one. That's kind of shocked me.
Moscow continues to turn its back on the worldwide boom in the renewable energy sector and place its bets on nuclear power and fossil fuels. Well, you know what? This is going to give them a few months of increased profits. And what's going to happen is they're going to fall behind the rest of the world as a result, and so will the Australians.
Yeah.
It's very short-sighted. But, you know, that's their opinion and whatever, you know. Now another one from Clean Technica. The Sun Day campaign, that is Sun Day campaign, has just released a press release, how about that for Redundancy Department, proclaiming the fact that non-hydro renewables has outproduced hydropower for the first time. Also, for the first time, wind contributed 5% of the nation's electricity. This nation, this time, of course, is the United States. And that means, as the growth of wind is going on, wind will probably pass hydro for its actual power output sometime in the next year or two. And
That's
continue to
probably
grow.
right about right. Yep.
Yeah. And when you add it to the other renewables, we'll probably be seeing renewables in electricity production passing nuclear in the not very distant future.
I'd say the only question is when. It's not a matter of if.
Well, yes, that's true. Okay, also on the 27th, from Daily Fusion, commercial buildings could cut their heating and cooling electricity by an average of 57% with advanced energy efficiency controls, according to a year-long trial at the controls of malls, grocery stores, and other buildings across the country.
This one I've got. This one's up there now.
Okay, let's look. Well, there
That's
you
just
go.
a typical roof, but what they're saying is those old-fashioned units that you see on a roof, probably been up there 30 years,
Yeah.
can be retrofit with new controls, sensors, adjustable speed motors, and various niceties that didn't exist when they built those things. And the net result, they're going to save up to 50, well, it was not up to, it's an average of 57% in power.
This is, you know, it's almost mind-boggling.
And simple things that to conceive of, but weren't possible 30-odd years ago.
Right.
Shut the thing off when it's too cold out. Use
Yes.
cold air instead of generating your own cold air.
Right,
The dumb little stuff like that, or run the fan a little bit slower.
right.
Things that people certainly thought of then, but the technology wasn't there. Now it is.
Now it is, and
And
a
it
lot of
pays.
this relates to smart grids and demand. What was the term? where the demand response.
Yeah, yep. Demand
This is-
management, demand response.
And that all feeds into the idea of a virtual power plant.
Exactly.
And this
Explain
is-
what a virtual power plant is.
Okay. Instead of having a power plant like Vermont Yankee, which has 640 megawatts of production, which has to go 24 hours a day, and by the way, is an extremely bad match to grid demand, because they have to produce power whether anybody wants it or not at night in order to be able to meet peak demand the next day. Instead of that, what you have is dispersed power, distributed power all over the countryside from various sources. And these distributed things, a wind turbine may only come on when the wind is blowing, but if it comes on and you don't want it, you can just say, I don't need you, shut down. It's very simple. There's no problem with having to get rid of excess power if the system is working properly, and they're starting to do this in Germany. And you can hook up very fast response plants of various kinds, including biomass plants. That if you're talking about gasification, you can gasify, store the gas.
You can save the gas.
Yeah, and then feed it into the power plant and get extremely clean emissions from that, because that's the nature of gasification if it's done properly. Same thing with hydro. Not so much the same thing with solar, but solar comes on during peak demand periods. So it's a pretty easy thing to have, many resources and have a computer that just picks which ones it's going to pick at any given time. And those are matched to grid demand. If you don't need them, they're shut down. If you do need them, they're turned on. If some of them are more expensive and others are less expensive and the demand goes up, you continually turn on the ones that are progressively more expensive. But the point is, you've got this very widely distributed thing, which is a very good match to the grid
To the demand. Yeah.
Unlike Vermont Yankee or a coal burning plant or whatever, which actually is a very bad match for grid demand. And
Well, you just can't shut them off.
you can't shut them off, which is why the Northfield Mountain Power Station was put up, which is a pumped storage unit. At night, when the price of power is low and the people at Vermont Yankee were putting out power and nobody was there to take it, they used it to pump water up to the top of the mountain. During the daytime, when the demand is higher than Vermont Yankee could produce, they run the water back down and reclaim the electricity. They lose power in the process. They make money, though, because the power they're losing is the power that they buy at a low price and sell at a high price.
I'm looking forward to a field trip where we go down there.
Oh,
and
we've
take
got to
a
go
picture
down.
of it.
Yeah,
I've been down there. It's
Have you?
really
Yeah.
fascinating.
it is. It's a wonderful place, and it's got trails and picnic tables and the little museum that shows you how it all works. It's beautiful. We were going to go down, and on the way down, stop at Vermont Yankee, go to the gate, ask if we could come in and look around, and then go down the Northfield Mountain and ask if we could come in and look around, because they will say, "Oh yeah, be my guest."
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very different place. Of course, it's not a place that you would really have to worry about terrorists attacking or something like that happening, I don't think. Okay, now let's see. And this brings us to the 28th yesterday, and this is what we were talking about, shales earlier. Are shales a bubble? This is an op-ed piece. Are shales a bubble? Coming from Resilience. HYPE works. HYPE has been the primary tool used by oil and gas with regard to shales, and it has worked brilliantly. You'll notice they're saying HYPE is the primary tool. Not,
Yeah, they are.
Not drilling, not drilling rigs and stuff like that. There is just one problem. When considering the shale economic viability, HYPE has the only aspect that actually existed, and I want to point out, this is not a joke. Shell oil has pulled out of fracking in North America because they can't make money.
Yeah.
Chesapeake, which was the second biggest fracking company in North America, has laid off many employees and looks like it may be going broke because they're not making money. We saw that thing earlier about the Monterey play. I saw a list earlier of fracking fields, and even though they're drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling, 80% of them are declining in output. Some of them
A lot faster than they thought they would,
Oh,
either.
much faster.
I gotta tell you, you just mentioned the word play.
Yeah.
And I know what it means because I've been following you. Play is what they call where they get natural gas from.
Yeah.
it's
a
the
field.
North Dakota play. It's
Yeah, it's the field.
It's the word, the technical word that the term uses, not to confuse the people out there.
Yeah.
We're not going to, nothing to do with Shakespeare.
Well, what have you got here?
Oh, I
this?
picked this up on the internet, and it's appropriate to energy. It
Okay,
happened
I
in New
want-
Zealand.
Tell me about it.
It happened in New Zealand, and
It's not up yet. You
Oh,
gotta
okay,
click it
yeah.
once more. Oh, there you go. Now everybody.
they're
knows
having
what
a
we're talking
conference about energy down there in New Zealand, and this polar bear showed up to protest the melting of the Antarctic ice shelf.
At a
Oh, my
Greenpeace
gosh.
campaign.
about.
Now,
Oh, my gosh.
I'm totally mystified by that because it's not a real polar bear, but
Sure
it
looks
moves.
real. Okay.
So there's probably two people inside of a polar bear suit.
I don't think so. That looks too
It
good.
might be a robotic
I'll
thing.
bet it is.
But it's beautifully done. This thing walked into the hotel under its own power. And the hotel
scared the
people didn't know what the heck to do
blazes
about it. But it looks so realistic.
Well, it looks so big. Have you ever been close to a bear?
In a zoo.
I came across a bear behind the Canal Street School. On Canal Street. I was not more than 75 feet from it. And, you know, it looks like a big Labrador Retriever. But I'll tell you, I would not have wanted to be any closer to that animal than I was, because it's a Labrador Retriever with its legs about as, you know, the forearm of a bear is gigantic. It's like that big around, and they're short, stubby little things. And they're massive, and you know they've got, you know, their muscles and bones and stuff connect with huge leverage. Oh my goodness, I don't want to be near one of those things.
They can climb.
And they can climb.
Oh,
Although
yeah.
I have seen a picture of a bear that was treed by a cat.
I saw that picture too. That was amazing.
That was very funny.
When I was a kid, we lived near the Bronx Zoo.
Okay.
And we would visit it frequently because I think it was free on Wednesdays. You know, so
Yeah.
all summer long we'd go to the Bronx Zoo. And they had the Kodiak bears, the huge
yeah.
bears, in a place like a big fenced tennis court with about a 14-foot high tent.
Yeah.
And it turned out, we found out, the scuttlebutt on the street, that these bears loved rolls, breakfast rolls.
Oh.
So we'd stop at the bakery on the way and get yesterday's rolls for nothing, you know, and bring them down there and throw them over the fence at the bears. And of course, the bears would climb up this 14-foot high fence, and they'd be almost to the top of it just to get
The roll.
the roll. They were begging like dogs, you know. But these
gosh.
they are huge animals.
They're huge.
They are very,
Those are Kodiak. They're
Yeah.
brown bears.
I guess they're the biggest bear that exists.
Very big
Yeah.
brown bears.
Amazing things.
Yeah, I read once about a guy who went out bear hunting, and he and his guide were in a cabin, and they had already shot the bear they were going to get, and they couldn't shoot another one without having to issue the guide did not want to shoot a bear in self-defense because the report you had to put together was just huge, and the guy said he had a 44 Magnum revolver, and his guide had a 454 Casal, and they had a 340 Weatherby Magnum and a 375 H&H Magnum. And these are guns that could be used. The rifles.
They're big guns.
They're big. They could take down elephants, and the little guns are the kinds of things that you would perhaps. If you're a good shot, you can take a black bear with one of those things.
Oh, I'm sure.
But this thing was a brown bear, and it chased them into their cabin, and they got to the point that they had to shoot, and they shot it 17 times, and after that it kind of walked out and fell over, but a ways away. These things you don't want to be near a bear. Absolutely do not want to be near a bear. They're not safe.
I hit one with my car once in Marlboro.
Really?
What did it do to your car?
Not much. It was a little bear, and it rolled over, took off in the woods. I didn't know they could move that fast.
Oh, they're very fast. I was told by a guy who knew about them, he said if you're on a hillside and you come across a bear and you feel like you have to run, don't run uphill. don't run across a hillside.
Run downhill. Yep, yep.
Because that's the only the bear will
They're
stumble.
not good at running
They're not good
downhill.
at running downhill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, let's see. We've really diverged there. The Energy Collective gave us this one. Large parts of the Southwest are drier than they were during the 1930s Dust Bowl. And latest science says unrestricted carbon pollution will make this a near permanent situation post-2050 in a growing portion of the country and around the world.
Yeah, I got
Not
something on
good
that
news. Oh, man, I don't.
A Dust Bowl picture from 1935.
And it's worse than that. And this article said that there were, what was it? Did you read the article? There were like 11 of these things that hit Oklahoma this year.
I don't remember that, but
It was.
I'll read a couple quick paragraphs here. Large parts of the Southwest are drier than they were during the 30s.
Yeah.
And the latest science says unrestricted carbon pollution will make this a near permanent situation post-2050 in a growing portion of this country and around the world for 1,000 years or more, if we don't do something. Earlier this month, the U.S. Drought Monitor warned that devastatingly dry, dusty, windy conditions in the southern Great Plains fueled concerns of a new dust bowl. The epicenter of the 30s Dust Bowl was where Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma come together. And I got that on the map. I'll pull it right up. National Weather Service has measured rain over the last 3.5 years and reported parts of these states have had less rain than what fell during a similar period in the 30s. And this is the part of the country that got hit worse by the Dust Bowl.
Right,
in
and
the
if you
30s.
look, if you
And
look at,
they're in the same situation
and this
right
is
now.
agricultural land, a lot of it, which was not agricultural, or at least not highly productive in that earlier time. It is very productive now, and if you look at this using Google Earth, you'll see that a lot of that area is full of round green dots because they've got those round, irrigated fields.
Irrigation.
Yeah,
But-
when you fly into Denver, you can see that.
Yeah,
Going
yeah.
around.
You can see it in Saudi Arabia too.
California is 100% in severe drought, and much of that, and again here we're going to get back to this in the discussion about aquaponics, much of that is where our lettuce comes from. And how much is lettuce going to cost in September? I have no idea, but I don't think I'm going to be buying lettuce in September this year. I think I'm going to be getting it a different way. Okay, let's go on. This is depressing. President Barack Obama is about to unveil a centerpiece of his agenda to fight climate change, calling for each state to meet carbon emissions and giving each state the job of deciding how they are met. Cap and trade is one option for many states. This is from the Times Record.
Yeah,
And
I
by
don't
the
have
way,
anything
I think
on
that's
that.
coming out on the 2nd of June, which, as I recall, is the day of the town meeting. for
Town
the
meeting,
budget.
yes.
So we're not going to be able to watch that live, not that I would anyway, because I don't have television. I shouldn't admit that on television.
I don't have one either.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, folks, there's no point in watching.
Guess who's watching the watchers, right?
We
right.
watch it on the internet.
Okay, and today, from the Courier Mail, a report from Goldman Sachs Global Commodities team said that Chinese demand for imported coal is past its peak. Past its peak. So demand for seaborne thermal coal will grow just 2% per year on average to 2018, leaving coal prices too weak to generate profits on new mines or infrastructure.
That's where the Australia coal's going.
Bad news for the Abbott government. How are they
Yeah.
going to? Oh, man.
Yeah.
And finally,
This, I think, is their death throes. you know?
well, you know, I mean, the Republicans in the United States and I've forgotten what his political party is, really should sit down and start thinking about the fact that they are going to be losing credibility unless their phony science turns out to be correct, which I would not give much chance of. And when they lose credibility, it's going to be very difficult for them to gain it back again. And now we have one last item here, which is from Clean Technica, and that is Germany's Energiewende is very much alive, despite people complaining about it to the contrary. The biggest winners in the first quarter of this year were our solar power, whose production is up 82.5% from last year. That's nice growth, wouldn't you say? offshore wind, which is up 33%. And at the same time, natural gas production is down 19.7%, hard coal is down 17.4%, and nuclear energy is down 4.6%.
Sell your stock.
Huh?
Sell your stock.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, times are changing, and I think that it would be wise for people to understand that so that they can know how to change with them. Now, everybody, we have got Mark Crowther here who wants to talk about aquaponics. And aquaponics, for those who don't know, Mark, why don't you tell people what aquaponics is, and then I'll tell people, just for a second, how important this is to energy.
Sure, sure. You want to bring up?
Yeah.
This
I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint here.
All right.
Oh.
And you start talking, and I'll bring it up into a
Yeah.
more
So-
usable function here. View. You
Yeah.
keep talking.
Okay. So aquaponics is basically the synthesis of growing fish and growing plants together, and it's a way to close the loop of energy, really, in that the plants feed off the fish waste and benefit from that. And the fish are able to have clean water with the help of the plants.
Right.
Because the plant roots end up really cleaning the water itself. So we keep scrolling.
So
Yeah, we've got just my blog here, Brattleponics, which is really where I write about my aquaponic endeavors, and it's linked to Reformer 802, their blogs. So it's markcrowther.blogspot.com. And this goes back to January of 2013. So I guess it's been about a year and a half of experimenting with aquaponics.
Well, you've been experimenting with aquaponics longer than that, though, haven't you?
No.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
started. This is new for you.
Well, yeah, pretty new for me. I've been a fish keeper since I was a kid, and noticed that when I put a plant in the tank, the fish required less maintenance. The tank required less maintenance.
What a brilliant thought.
And I thought, there's got to be a tie here. And then I had visited SUNY Cobleskill and saw maybe 20 years ago some tilapia growing together with some water plants, and in fact it was duckweed, and I saw that the fish poop was helping to grow the duckweed, and they would feed the duckweed to the tilapia, and I thought, well, hey, if the fish can do it, then we should be getting on board with this idea.
Yeah.
So that was in one of their labs, and certainly my whole take with aquaponics being in Vermont has been a bit different, because we've got up here at the 42nd, 43rd latitude, we've got a much different climate than the tilapia require. And so I've been growing cold water fish instead, and trying to really reduce the kind of energy input to maximize the energy output.
Right.
The kind of plants that like to grow in Vermont. So instead of growing tropical heirloom tomatoes with tilapia, we're talking about growing lettuce.
More staples.
And
Yeah.
the kinds of things that like the cool climate here in Vermont.
Well, if you follow this thing the way it was originally intended, according to your writing, it takes 45 minutes.
Yeah, and actually
So we're going to skip over some.
Yeah, we're certainly
I
going
want to point out we're approaching the end of our hour. So let's put this together in a 2 or 3 minute piece for people who are not going to watch past the end of the hour.
We
Yeah.
can, we
And then
can
we'll
start
pick it
right
up
off
from
here.
there.
What is aquaponics?
Well, let me break in here for a second.
Sure.
Mark just explained what aquaponics is, and I think what I should do is explain why it's important for energy. Agriculture is a huge consumer of power, and fertilizer uses a lot of fossil fuels. And the people don't think about the amount of fossil fuels this uses. But we're running into trouble in this country where we've got this huge drought in California, we've got a drought threatened for the Midwest, we've got unsustainable agricultural conditions, and here we've got aquaponics, and the output of aquaponics, if you've got a greenhouse which is lighted and heated in the winter, in the depths of winter, and you're growing appropriate vegetables and fish, you can get 40,000 pounds of vegetables and 20,000 pounds of fish out of 1 acre of land.
That's more than a family's going to need.
That's more than a family's going to need. Actually, if you think about agricultural production, that is huge production. And you've done it in a controlled climate where you control pests, where you have no fertilizer required because the fish are providing it. You have basically, you're using 10% of the water that you would use in a normal field.
You're just reusing the water over and over
You're
again.
reusing the water, and it's not going off into a water table. And in fact, I have a system. You know, I need to give the fair, what's it called?
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. I have a system that I share with Tori Weekers, who's my landlady, and we've been doing exactly the same kind of thing that you have of trying to deal with plants that are appropriate to the climate and fish that are appropriate to the climate. And the system that we've got is not up to speed yet, but this is the kind of thing that I think people can lean on when times get tough in the future.
So one of the things that I really appreciate about aquaponics is how inventive people get with their designs.
Oh yeah.
And here we see what's pretty typical is the use of gravity for the fish to be growing down below, and we've got, in this case, lettuce growing up above, and because the water is recirculating, and because we've got a gravity dynamic here, we're only really pumping the water in one direction, and then the water
flows
comes
back down by
As
gravity.
it comes back
Yep.
down, it oxygenates the tank, and the fish
What
stay
kind
happy.
of what kind of fish are those?
Here we've got, these look like tilapia.
They look like tilapia.
That's a very professional looking
It is, but it
installation.
also
Yeah.
looks like it might be in somebody's home.
It's beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
And it looks like a couple of different kinds of lettuce. And it, you know, it doesn't look atypical. I've seen things like that in people's homes,
Yeah,
you know, in their greenhouses.
and there are many different designs. We can get into the designs a bit later, but basically you see that because the water is recirculating, as you mentioned before,
Right.
We're really just using a very small fraction of the amount of water
No.
that it takes.
They
in
all look so
traditional
happy.
They do look happy. And as a matter of fact, they look happy in the greenhouse too. One thing I should mention here is when I got into this, I was afraid that those lettuce plants were going to have their roots destroyed because they would drown.
Yeah.
And what I found out was that the numbers of plants that can grow in water
Yeah.
is just astonishing. And mint will do it, and obviously watercress, but lettuce will do it. And they will just grow in the water. And in the system that we're using, they aren't actually submerged all the time, but in this system, in a lot of systems, they can be.
Yeah.
And
They don't even need soil in some cases.
they don't need soil, and they don't need they don't drown because the water's heavily oxygenated.
That's right. That's right. And this is a practice that goes back thousands of years. It's not like we're talking about new technology.
You will show us some of those
Yeah.
pictures.
Although
won't you?
the designs,
There we go.
the
So-
designs are new.
So,
that
I
we're
mean, here
using.
we've got the Aztecs, and they had these rafts, and this was in
They're floating farms.
in Mexico, and
Yeah.
Lake Tenochtitlan, and around the lake, the water, they were trying to grow things, but the soil wasn't good, so they would create these floating farms, taking the waste from the canals, putting them on these rafts, and growing the food right on the rafts.
And how
Right.
many years ago was this?
And this was thousands of years ago.
Wow.
And this was right at the edge of the city, which meant that the people who lived there had very, very fresh vegetables.
So, right. They call them chinampas, and we know in Asia, the rice paddies are fertilized with carp.
Right,
And
right.
here we've got a picture of Lake Titicaca, and they've got these, they make these very elaborate reed constructions. They make houses and boats and everything out of these reed beds.
So they're all
And,
like floating farms,
yeah, these floating farms.
trees and everything.
Oh, yeah. and I think this is a rice paddy here. This is, you know, a modification. We know that cultures around the world have been practicing aquaponics for many years. And it really is based on this whole idea of the nitrogen cycle, which we are trying to keep intact. And
Which is? Explain that.
Well, basically the nitrogen cycle is taking the waste and turning that into production and having the production benefit the thing growing it. In this case, it starts with the fish. And
I could run through it chemically if you want.
yeah.
The fish produce urine just like other animals do, but they I don't know how they excrete it, to tell you the truth. They may put it out through their gills. I don't know, but
Yeah.
they excrete urine. They don't want to live
Through their
in
gills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't want to live in urine, but they don't have to because bacteria come along and turn the urine into ammonia.
That's right.
Well, ammonia is really bad for fish, but there are thankfully other bacteria that will turn the ammonia into nitrites, which is bad for fish, except there are other bacteria that will turn the nitrates into nitrites.
That's
I mean,
right.
I got that wrong. The ammonia is turned into nitrites, which are then turned into nitrates. And those nitrates are not so bad for fish, but they're really good for plants. So the plants take up the nitrates out of the water as fertilizer, and they use that. The inputs into this system are sunlight and fish food.
Right.
And the fish food can be grown, if it's vegetarian fish, in the greenhouse. So
The fish food can be grown by the hydroponics.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, duckweed is a good example.
Yeah.
It really is. And
So basically, a lot of this is very natural.
oh,
It
the whole
occurs
thing
in
is
the real-
the whole thing
real-
is natural.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is emulate nature here. That's really the job that we've got
Yeah.
in aquaponics, is to try to emulate nature in the best way possible. And you want to, and it's just like a solar panel. You're trying to get the highest efficiency you can. You don't want to have aphids growing on your plants. It's not a nice thing to do. But usually in an aquaponic system, those pests are pretty much kept under control, and you don't have to worry about weeds.
That's right.
You don't weed these
That's
things.
a beautiful thing. And yeah, it's really interesting how, these invisible microbes are doing all the heavy lifting. Converting this very toxic waste, their pee and poo, into something that the plants love. So
And they work
that's-
for less than the minimum wage.
Yeah,
They
and
do that. It's true.
So this is the nitrogen cycle, and the problem with soil-based farming is that a lot of the fertilizer is mined from somewhere else to get the
Right.
nitrogen, the phosphorus.
Right.
It depletes our natural resources, and then what happens after heavy rain? A lot of that runoff goes right into the streams, into our watersheds. It pollutes,
Right.
and it kills the fish.
And
it's not a sustainable.
we've got that huge dead area south, just off the mouth of the Mississippi River.
The Delta.
Just off the Delta, there's a huge dead area in the Gulf of
Because
Mexico.
I'm not even aware of that.
Yeah, it is hundreds of square miles of ocean that are
Oh, out in the sea.
out in the sea, where there's no fish, there's no plants. There are plants. There's algae blooms and things like that, but it's basically just a dead area from the point of view of normal ecological. Now we are getting to the end of our hour.
Yes, very close.
So what we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye to the people who are watching us on broadcast, cablecast, and hello to people who are watching us on
BCTV.
webcast, because they can continue, but we're going to enter into a second show here, which is going to be about aquaponics, and we're just going to sit and talk for aquaponics, hopefully for an hour.
Sounds
I
great.
think we can do it.
I think we can do that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.